Hey guys, and welcome back to Philline, a podcast where we talk about what it's like being in our 20s in the 20s. For today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my relationship with two of my favorite people, and that is my parents. I'm going to be talking about how our relationship has evolved from before college, after college, and how it is today. So yeah, let's get started. Hey guys, and happy almost end of January. I can't believe I feel like this whole month passed and it was so fast. And I feel like it's kind of a good thing because January has kind of felt a little bit more positive in comparison to just last year overall. So I'm feeling good. I don't know about you guys. And yeah, I'm just honestly overall excited about February. There's a lot of things going on. I guess what I can say is right now, I'm going to get a haircut. That's one. And it's not really a haircut. It's more like I'm going to get my hair colored. But even that small thing, having a little change always gets me excited, even though it's just something small. But also, I'm going to be getting a new tattoo. So I'm really excited to be sharing that with you guys. And I'll talk more about it, I guess, when I get it, which is going to be around middle of February. I guess another thing that's kind of coming up, it's not really that exciting, but Leo is going to get neutered, and definitely I knew that this was going to be something that we had to do in terms of Leo because my family's dog isn't neutered, and I thought that because, I've seen how Milo is, and he's 6 years old right now, and he's still super aggressive, and yes, he's fine not being neutered, but I personally thought that it was the right decision, at least for Leo. So I'm not looking forward to all the days that he's going to be whining and crying and the poor guy's going to be in a cone and I'm just going to be so heartbroken for like 2 weeks. But yeah, that's what's coming up for me, at least in February. What else? I feel like so much happened this week that I almost can't even keep track of what has happened, to be honest. WandaVision came back. I think I mentioned that. It's a really good show so far. It's really interesting and unique in terms of just how all the other Marvel movies and shows have been. It's kind of its own genre, and I really like that, and I think it's about to get super dark, so I highly suggest you guys go and watch it. It's on Disney Plus, and they come out with new episodes every Friday, so yeah. And also, All American is back. If you guys haven't watched All American, now that's a really good show, and by first look, most people will be like, oh, it's just a sports show, and it's not really that interesting, but trust me, you should watch it. It's definitely a lot more than just sports. So the third season just came back, and I think we're on episode 3. I might be completely wrong, but I highly suggest it. It's a really good show. And for all the ladies, all of the guys there are very handsome and just super cool to watch, and just, you fall for the guy characters in all the shows, so you guys should definitely watch it. And before I get to the rest of the episode, y'all, the stock market is insane this week. I don't know if you guys have been even keeping track of the GameStop situation, but I think it's so funny, but also yikes, because I didn't even know it was a thing. So basically, all of these people have been shorting their stock, so basically borrowing from other people and hoping that the price drops even more, so they buy some more and then sell it to the other person for a higher price in order to make money. And it's definitely more complicated than that, but at least from my understanding, that's what happened. And people on Reddit were like, okay, let's not let these people win. Let's just all furiously buy shares from GameStop. And mind you, it was $4 per share. And now all of a sudden it's at 400. Well, it was yesterday. But the thing is that surprises me is that today, there's an application called Robinhood. I think I talked about this in an earlier podcast episode, but they shut off the ability to buy and sell for GameStop. Isn't that insane? And I think that angers me because it's kind of like the government saying, oh no, you can't do that to just normal shareholders. And it gives so much more control to the actual people that are more involved in stocks and, the super rich investors. And they were probably freaking out that they didn't want to lose money. And now Robinhood's doing this. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be sued by a bunch of places, a bunch of people. So I'm really interested to at least see how that goes and how that plays out. I definitely wouldn't say buy GameStop now. At least in the beginning of the week, it could have been a better idea because to buy GameStop shares at $4 and then have it go up to 400, you literally could have gotten at least 65,000 from just that. And I think that's crazy. But after this whole mess, I don't recommend getting it. It's kind of just cool to pan out and just let it do its thing and kind of watch what happens. But I have been doing more research in, I guess, trust funds and hedge funds and mutual funds and just general stocks that will give you back some type of return every now and then. For example, a few stocks that have quarterly returns. And I think that's cool because you could get money back and kind of repump it back into the stock market and invest in more stocks. I just recently learned that. But yeah, I'm definitely more interested in stocks these days, like I've been saying, and hopefully I do more research and really get to know more about these mutual funds so I can talk more about it in a future episode. So yeah, okay, well, now we can get into the talk of college and my parents, and I only thought of this idea because on my Instagram, I had asked a questionnaire for my followers about what kind of topics they'd be interested in learning about. So I got a few, and the two that were really standing out to me was, one, how senior year of college was. So that's definitely a whole nother topic that would take a whole nother podcast episode. So I'll definitely get through that the next episode. But the one that I thought I really wanted to talk about was how our relationships with our parents should be. And I think it's a good topic because my relationship with my parents, it's been so up and down. Maybe not now. It's definitely a lot better now, but my close friends can definitely vouch for me that my relationship with my parents wasn't always the greatest thing on earth, especially because there was a culture gap and especially because I was the first child. And every first child who's listening knows that it's so hard to be the first child. You have so many expectations. You need to be a role model for your siblings and you need to just never mess up, basically, which I'm not saying you can't mess up, but that's the expectation of you as an older child. And I definitely feel like the oldest kid always has it worse than the younger siblings. And honestly, I'm pretty sure it's a proven fact because the first child is always experimenting. The second is okay, we learn from our mistakes. And the third, if people have a third child, is they can basically do whatever they want. And that's how it is in my house, right? And I'm not saying that to complain about how I was raised in comparison to how my siblings were raised because, you know, every child is different. But my brother definitely can do whatever the heck he wants in that house, I swear. But that's just how it is. And I'm only just learning or really understanding this now, especially that I'm a little bit older and kind of have an awareness. Because obviously when you're in the moment growing up, nothing seems fair to you as an oldest child, right? And I think that that's literally never going to change in any generation because there's always going to be differences between how someone grew up in their current generation versus how someone else grows up in the next generation, especially due to social pressures, social media pressures, expectations of culture. And it's even worse when, for me personally, I had to differentiate between Filipino culture and American culture. And to the person, shout out Gabby, who asked this question in my Instagram to talk about whether there are boundaries between your relationship and your parents. I'm definitely going to go into that because I've had a lot of experience in that area. So just hang tight and listen on. So again, I'm only 24, and even though I'm not really halfway through my 20s yet, the change in my relationship with my parents has definitely advanced basically right away as soon as I graduated college. And a lot of that just had to do with my maturity, my mentality, my awareness of things, and just myself kind of growing up and realizing that people also have feelings other than yourself. And sometimes I didn't really pay attention to that aspect. So now I kind of think both ends on how I feel versus how my parents feel. And again, this applies to basically a lot of my relationships in my life, that I almost always consider the other person and try my best to make actions and go in a direction that kind of satisfies the both of us. So before college, I think that's a good place to start. Childhood is I feel like everybody kind of goes through the same childhood experience with their parents because they're little, they don't really know anything, and you're going to mess up and talk back and you have fights here and there. But before college, okay, so the first 3 years of college, I didn't live at school actually. And this was kind of a personal choice, but also swayed by my dad, who was constantly telling me that it's a waste of money. And I definitely don't regret not living at school. Although I did miss a good social aspect of college, I don't regret it because living at school had to have been another 12,000 times 3 years, another $36,000 that I'd have to pay for. And yikes, like just thinking about that, I had it cheap too because the college that I was attending wasn't even the most expensive in the state, let alone the entire world. Had I been living in Columbia University, where I wanted to go at first, and just a backstory, I didn't get in. I mean, I made it past the interview process, but that's besides the point. Had I lived there, that would have been $36,000 a year just for school and even dorming, and just it's a lot. So just thinking about it, I'm thankful that I didn't live at school. So those first 3 years, I was super distracted just with all the drama in my life, and I have to say that my relationship with my parents weren't really that strong and they weren't really that well. And my communication in general just wasn't as good as how it is now. And just my ability to open up was definitely a lot less in college. So when I think about that, I never really told them about my stresses, including just being stressed about school tests. I didn't really talk about it that much. And I think that just came from me wanting to be in denial that I was stressed, if that made sense. So I just didn't want to think that I was stressed, and I didn't want to communicate that with my parents either. And I think just overall, the fact that I was still kind of young, I didn't really think it was necessary to be telling my parents everything. And I'm sure a lot of other people can have different things they can say about their relationship with their parents before college, because obviously everyone had a different lifestyle, you know? But for me, I didn't think I needed to tell them anything. And honestly, where the switch flipped, I can't really think about when that happened, to be honest. I really don't know. I want to say it was when I had gotten rid of the negative friendships in my life that I mentioned in a previous episode. I think a lot of my issues with communicating with them came down to the fact that I was going through too much for myself and not really loving myself. So I couldn't really find it easy for me to open up with my parents about anything. And that, I feel like that's, just looking back at it, gives me a headache because there's not really a pinpoint time and event that opened up the doors for me to finally talk to my parents. And I feel like for the most part, at least for most of my high school life and college life, I was doing everything that kind of we were in agreement was the right thing. And it wasn't until I wanted to do things that kind of disagreed with how they viewed things that there was this kind of disconnect. But also I feel like it was super necessary for us to have a closer relationship. And definitely it got better after junior year when I decided to live on my own for the last year at Rutgers. And a lot of people are like, oh, your relationship with your parents will definitely get better when you're not living under their house. And I think this is partially true because when that happened to me, it really changed a lot of things. And maybe not seeing them all the time kind of had them miss me more often, or I missed them more often. And then, you know, when we were in contact with each other or when we saw each other in person, it was more focused on the positives of things, how life is going, what's good with you, oh, this and that, and what's good with you, this and that. So I think that's kind of what flipped the switch, if you want to pinpoint an exact moment. But in terms of, I guess, just them kind of being my best friend now, it's definitely not the same as what you would call your other best friends who are your age and kind of know where you are right now. There's a lot of differences between me calling my parents my best friends versus me having my best friends in my friend group that I trust with absolutely everything. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I trust my parents with absolutely everything, like I said. But that doesn't mean I have to immediately communicate everything that's going on in my life. And even that applies to my friend group as well. So there's kind of things that I kind of pick and choose and pick with whoever I need to talk to about it that I feel like would be most useful in helping me understand the situation and help me figure out my next action. So for my parents, I feel like that biggest aspect of my life that I talk to them about is my career, is my investments, is my kind of just growing up and living up on my own. Those are the things I kind of talk to my parents about. And it's kind of, I talk to them more when I need some advice on things that take years to experience and learn from. So, they already have the years and experience from just their life in general and how they handled things and situations. So I feel like I would talk to them more about those types of things, where if I'm stuck on something else that kind of applies to, modern 20-year-old situations, I'm not going to go and talk to my parents about it, but that's because they don't live in this current generation. I feel like if I had asked them something that relates to my current 20-year-old struggle that isn't involved with just general life, I feel like they would give me an answer that doesn't really apply to today's generation 100%. It might apply sort of, but it wouldn't exactly be the same situation as how it is now. And again, I think that's a big reason why I didn't open up to them as much. It was just knowing that they wouldn't really help me understand the current situation. But what's funny is that they actually did go through the same situations, but just in different ways, right? And they relate to you a lot more than what you would normally think. And again, that took me a long time to realize. So before college, I wasn't that open with them. I didn't think, they wouldn't understand what I'm going through. And I've said that to them a couple times when I had asked if I could live at school my senior year. And yes, it wasn't, I just asked and had them see their reaction to it. It wasn't the best type of agreeing type conversation, but I even asked, I was like, you don't know what I'm going through, blah, blah, blah. How could you possibly know? And they looked at each other and they were like, Philline, are you serious? Like, of course they knew what was going on. And of course they were aware of just general things that happened in college. And they had normal parent worries about me going to college. And it was even worse because I was the first child. So obviously at that moment, I didn't understand that. But now looking back, I do. So I feel like it just comes over time. And especially as you mature, the relationship just kind of naturally becomes more mature, especially because there are adult issues that, nobody else really knows because they don't have the experience. Like, I can't really ask my friends who also are looking for houses how to do it the right way or how to do it in a way that saves you more money. My parents would know because they've already done that, right? So I feel like that's kind of where I differentiate between what I talk about with my friends versus my parents. And obviously, when it even comes to storytelling, I'm not going to go and tell my parents about every single party and event I've been to. I mean, they already know that I partied before in my life. That's kind of all the extent that they need. But, obviously, I'd give more information to my friends. And that's just one example. It's super obvious, but when it comes to kind of big and major life decisions, I really do have a deep talk with them and kind of have third-party opinions, but not the opinions that are kind of swayed towards you. And yes, obviously, your parents' opinions will be swayed in favor for you, but they would give you the hard truth that maybe this specific direction isn't the right direction for you. And your friends wouldn't know that because they haven't experienced it yet. So that's why I really go and open up to my parents when I feel like I have to make a big decision that kind of affects a good portion of the rest of my life. And I mean, college, the biggest decision you have to make was figuring out your major, and basically everything is still high school. You're still taking classes. You're basically following a curriculum that applies to your major. So obviously I talked with them about my major and what direction I want to go to. But other than that, I didn't feel like it was necessary to be opening up to my parents about anything else. So fast forward to senior year of college when I was really looking for jobs, and that was really when I started opening up to them because I didn't know where I was going to go. And a big thing about college and senior year is that you have this pressure to find a job that's basically in the field of your major. And for me, as many biomedical engineers can agree, the job market wasn't as open as it said on Google. So, freshman year when I was looking for majors, it said, oh, by the time you graduate, the percentage of jobs in biomedical engineering is going to go up by 7 to 10% in your state. And of course, you're going to be excited like, oh, this looks like a good job prospect, but nobody tells you that you needed a PhD in biomedical engineering for you to even land a decent paying job. And that's totally going to be a whole nother topic that I'm going to talk about when it comes to that senior year in college episode. But it was just so frustrating. And it got to the point where I was like, Mom, Dad, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. I don't know where my life is going because I can't even land a decent biomedical engineering job without a PhD. And I'm not trying to go back to school for another 4 to 5, 6 years. Who knows how long that would have taken me. But yeah, so they were able to at least calm me down and let me know, listen, it's not the end of the world and you will find your path. And although it's not right now, it'll eventually come to light. So that was really nice. At least it helped me at least increase our relationship and kind of improve it and have me talk more about my life in general. So that's where that started. And now after college, I feel like we've gotten just even more close, and a lot of it just comes from adulthood and me finally passing 21 and just focusing on kind of more serious things in life, a house, getting married, having a long time investment in things and long-term jobs and 401ks and just things that we kind of can relate as adults. So I think I do talk to them about a lot more things in general. And then we kind of just talk about anything and everything. I mean, now that I moved out, I only see them like once a week, if even that. So when I do see them, it's nice. It's more positive vibes. It's more asking about what's new and how's the job going and how's life going and just kind of more positive vibes rather than just me being at the house and not really having much to talk about with them. But don't get me wrong, I definitely talk to my parents more than my siblings. And it's not that my siblings are hiding anything, but I think that just I always felt the need to be talking to them about everything in my life. So that just kind of came naturally as time passed. And I tried my best, don't get me wrong, I tried my best all of college and even now to at least be completely honest with them and try to at least give them all the information that's important to them. So especially when I would go somewhere, who would be with me or where I was going. And I feel like it's just better for me to be honest with them than have them pissed at me for lying at them, if that makes sense. So I'd rather have them mad that I was being honest than not. So that mentality kind of just grew with me. And again, that mentality kind of didn't come into play until I turned 21. I really don't know what happened when I turned 21. All of a sudden, everything just made sense. I don't know if that even makes sense. I mean, not all of my life makes sense, but just the reasons why my parents felt a certain way, it all just made sense. And I finally understood why they were always so protective of me. And even now, there's just a lot of situations with females in general and just people in their 20s that are kind of risky in life and can really put someone's life to danger. So just knowing that now, I completely understand their reasoning and their emotional protection over me. And again, back to the whole moving out, I've grown closer to my parents because I've kind of understood finally what it's like raising a family in an apartment. And no, I don't have kids yet, obviously, but just taking care of Leo on its own is such a big responsibility. It's so many bills. And I always tell them, I can't believe you have a dog and 3 children to pay for. And my family's dog, Milo, obviously, he's 6 years old. He's not really that needy in terms of bills, but had they taken him to the vet more often for more checkups, I mean, vet appointments are not cheap, and I can understand why they don't bring him as much anymore. And, he's a healthy dog. He doesn't have any issues. But just thinking about kids' vaccinations and kids' doctor appointments and health insurance, even health insurance, I see the prices of it. I mean, I'm still 24 and under my parents, but I know other people who are past the age of having to be under their parents, and just knowing how much that costs. I can't believe that they've carried this burden for us for so long. Yes, I call it a burden. I mean, I'm sure it's not a burden for them, but it's expensive. And that has definitely opened my eyes to just how great parents they are, and just how great parents are in general, and how much they have to hold for their children. So now every time they give me advice or critique me or tell me something, I take it really heavily because it's important pieces of advice. And that's another thing, right? I got close with my parents because I was the one who acted first. They're not going to come up to me and say, hey, we're not close enough. I mean, I'm sure they thought we were already close enough. And it's really up to the child to open up to the parents and kind of decide whether they want to open up and have a close relationship with their parents. And it does work both ways for sure, but parents and adults in general just go through a lot of adult stuff that college kids really wouldn't be interested in. I mean, my dad's not going to talk to me about his high blood pressure and how he's freaking out about his high blood pressure or that he's anxious. I mean, as a college child, when I was in college, I really didn't. I mean, I cared about school and which bar we were going to go to that weekend. So it really is just what I thought of at the time was important. So, they weren't going to go talk to me about those kind of issues. But as I was growing up, those issues are starting to become my issues. I have anxiety, and yes, it runs in my family. So I open up to my mom about it, and my mom talks to me that, hey, your dad also is like this. So, based on his experience and how we've handled things, this is a good direction for you on handling your anxiety. So I think that was a good aspect in terms of how I opened up with my parents about that. And it also just gives light to the differences between my culture and theirs. And obviously, both cultures are amazing and beautiful. I love the Philippines. I love the Filipino culture. It's just very different from American culture, at least the culture that my parents grew up in. So, we're going to have disagreements and different things that we feel aren't the right direction. Like, for example, me moving out. That was super important for me to just build my relationship. But, convincing my parents took a little bit more. But that's what's important with communicating with them, is that, they see your side of it and they can understand, just the expectations of this culture and just my mindset growing up in this generation versus theirs. It's more like agreeing to disagree, but respectfully, And again, I think a lot of it was me just not focusing so much on them approving me and accepting me, because end of the day, you're literally their child. They're going to approve you and accept you and just have open arms for you if they're, good parents. But that's besides the point, right? You don't want to dwell too much on trying to impress them, trying to make them happy, trying to not bring up a certain event in the past that at first they weren't acceptive of. It's more of you have to be willing to know your self-worth and kind of portray that through their eyes and kind of show them your reasoning and that your head is clear in making this decision, and kind of talk to them in a way that, you've already decided to go this way, but they can disagree with it and they won't be able to change your decision, but they'll still love you either way. And you can hear them out for sure. I've heard out my parents so many times, more than I can remember. And it's good because you want to hear their side, because in some aspects, they are right. There are a lot of things that they were like, oh, but you should consider this. And that ended up being an actual consideration of mine. And I've seen it happen in some of the decisions that I make. And again, you talking to them and a disagreement happening and you showing them that, hey, this is a different generation and sometimes things are different. It'll be a realization for them as well, because they were the same way with their parents. There is no difference in how they acted with their parents versus you acting with your parents. So that can be something to connect over to in discussions where, you remember your parents did the same thing and you still did what you felt was right. And this is what I feel is right. And that was awesome to me because when I kind of had that self discovery moment where I felt like I was my own person for once and not just their child, that right there is the start of the adult mentality. And again, I didn't realize that until I was like about 21 and kind of more aware of my own decisions and myself as a person. And that has helped me so much in kind of when I realized that I'm my own person and have my own opinions and feelings about things, it made the conversation so much easier in the sense that I was able to communicate my issues and my side on the current topic with them, and they could understand my side and we could kind of come to a mutual agreement. Meanwhile, when I was younger, I didn't really listen to my parents, and a lot of that was just rebellion and just me being young and not really understanding situations. And I've definitely learned a lot just even in the past 4 years of my relationship with my parents. They've definitely opened my eyes to so much, and just living on my own has made me realize that they do put their heart and soul into their family, and that's something that I too want to have for my future family. So now this ties into kind of the question that Gabby had asked me on my Instagram regarding this topic. If there should be boundaries. And one boundary I definitely should say is do not ask your parents for advice unless you 100% want it, because if you don't want it 100%, you're going to get annoyed by the advice that they give you, trust me. And my parents, and this is just Filipino culture, I don't know about other cultures, but just my personal experience with Filipino culture, they will be brutally honest and will definitely confuse you even more about your situation if you didn't 100% want to hear what they had told you just now. But that doesn't mean to not talk to them and not keep in regular contact, because that's also important. They won't really get to know you as a person, what you like, what makes you upset, if you don't make the active action to go and talk to them, or at least keep in regular contact, just so they can see, what's important in your life, what upsets you, what makes you happy. They have to get to know you too. And it's not like they don't know you as, obviously you're their child, but they don't hang around you 24/7. And as you grow up, you're going to be changing too. You're not going to be the cutest little child that they remember from years ago. And that's something you should remember too, especially when you're trying to talk to them. As an older child, as the oldest child for me, it's hard for them because, this is their first little bird flying away from the nest. And I really didn't understand that at first. It was super frustrating just to get them to understand that I'm just trying to live my life and be happy about it. But at the same time, I didn't know either. It's all a learning experience. And I think it just starts with you as a child, wanting to make that effort to be close with them. And that effort also includes being at least a little bit respectful. You don't have to make everything an argument. You don't have to make every single conversation petty and rude just because you had a bad argument the night before. And I definitely had my experience and at least improved in that aspect too, because when I was in college, when I was frustrated, I would let it out on everyone else and still continue to be mad at somebody and talk to them in a way that they were definitely aware that I was still mad. But, as we grew up, our conversations like that kind of disappeared. And that's because we've kind of just learned to move on from current arguments and just keep moving on, keep staying positive, and just understand that we are all our own people. And also kind of tying back into college, it takes time for your parents to realize you can do things on your own. And some might just take longer than other parents. And my parents needed to basically see me grow up through college, graduate, and just make it through college. And that was fine with me. I was really determined to prove it to them. And that kind of set me straight in school. I was really focused and really determined to at least graduate with at least a 3.0, which I just made it. Thank you, God. But yeah, even past my bachelor's, I went to go on and try and get my master's. So, after that, it wasn't a decision from my parents or pressure from my parents. I just wanted my master's. But yeah, I guess overall was just wanting to exceed their expectations, which I did. And you just kind of have to prove that to your parents. And before you know it, you guys will be closer than you've ever been. But like I said, I feel like even when it comes down to if at least they were to ask me anything, I'd be completely honest with them and I'd be completely comfortable being honest with them. I think at this point and at this age at least, we should be at least comfortable with our parents and kind of opening up to them like that. And what's even better is that now, because they've seen you grow up and they know that you're not perfect and you know that they're not perfect. So I think that mutual agreement kind of helps and keeps the conversation in a more understanding direction rather than what you thought was, everything is what they want, everything is about their expectations and their desires for your future, and more about how you truly feel about things and just you as a person. So I think that's developed so much from college, and I'm honestly grateful, but what I can say is that the moments where I should have told the truth or I should have been more open, those taught me a lot. And I feel like, again, kind of, you can't have the good without the bad, like I said in the episode before or the one before that. I feel like you won't learn these lessons unless they happen, and you kind of have to test how comfortable you want to be with your parents, because again, it's really different with everybody. Some people are super close with their parents and other people just don't tell their parents anything. And I feel like either way isn't the right way. It's really just dependent on your relationship with your parents and how comfortable you are. But I definitely agree that there should be some level of communication where you're always in contact with them and basically just trying to keep up to date with each other. And I think that's important. I literally call my parents every day, to the point where sometimes I do it on purpose just to be annoying. But I'm grateful for these moments. And I think that if I did have that level of communication with my parents in college, I would have realized things a lot sooner just about myself and the people around me, and would have realized that my support system still is the strongest at home, and that's always how it's going to be, and I love that. And I remember because I would always try to talk to my mom about things, and she'd always say, you will definitely come back to me about this topic when you're older, and you're going to say, you know what, Mom, you were right. And maybe that hasn't happened as often yet, just because I don't have kids, because I think it had to do with being a mom. But I'm sure when the time comes, I'll have to go to her and just be like, listen, Mom, you were right. I don't know how to handle this. How was your experience, and what did you do? Because how you see yourself growing up is different from how your parents saw you growing up, and also is different from how your parents grew up from their parents. So there's just a lot of different views and different sides that come into play. So I think having that relationship is important too, because there's a lot of decisions in your life where you have to go to somebody who's already done the things and experienced them. And who are the best people than your own parents to go and ask? And of course, just a little side thing, they're aging as we're aging. So I feel like in our 20s, when we do get older, this is an important decade, we are more aware of the people around us and that nothing's stagnant. And I think, again, after college, we kind of escape that bubble where everything's the same, because obviously people are advancing in life, moving out, having different jobs in different places, and things around you start to change. And that's when you really realize that, your parents aren't going to be that age forever. So even that in the back of my head, sometimes I am continuously grateful for the time that I spend with them. And I purposely make time out of my week to go and spend time with them. And I think even that has increased significantly since I moved, because obviously I'm not home all the time, but now I want to hang out with them and I want to see my family more. So you kind of plan. And I think moving out kind of helped in that aspect as well, in terms of our communication, because, you make plans when you're feeling like hanging out, not when you're not feeling like hanging out, unless you're the type to make plans when you don't want to hang out. But that's beside this point. So when I do make plans with my parents, it's basically on a day where I do want to see them. I'm in a good mood and I'm not really having a bad day. So I'm sure that when something is planned on their side, they feel the same way, especially when it's their kid. So I love that. And there's always opportunity for growth. And you kind of have to embrace those moments when you don't necessarily connect with your parents, but take it as a way of both of you to grow together and understand each other's sides. So, yeah, you may disagree on a lot of things: finances, religious beliefs, political beliefs, how you raise your children. But again, it's a matter of agreeing to disagree and kind of working together because, your family is not going to be the same as you. And this applies to everyone in life and everyone around you. They're not you. And everyone's going to have different opinions about things, but you kind of have to embrace that fact and kind of use what other people view towards things to kind of make up your own way of life, your own way of raising kids, your own religious views, political views, how you handle your money and boundaries, everything like that. And again, you won't know what you want until you experience or see things that you necessarily don't want for yourself. So how would you know you don't want it unless you see it and you're like, I don't really think I want to do that for my kids or my future or my religion, things like that. And on top of you changing, our parents are also changing, and they're not the same parents that you had when you were in college or high school. I can definitely vouch for that. My parents are a lot different now, but that's what I'm trying to get in that is you're all still growing and all still evolving. So again, just embrace it. And I feel like if you haven't yet, take the initiative and just open up about anything that's bothering you to your parents, because they really are my best friends in that aspect, that I know that whatever's bothering me, I'm more than comfortable to talk to them about it. And they'll help me with open arms get past anything that kind of is thrown in my way. And honestly, a good place to start is kind of talking about their history. Me and my siblings love asking my parents about my family history, and every family history has some drama, some crazy event that happened, or insane situations, or just crazy family members. It's in every family, so it's cool to kind of understand. And I think it's important to know your family background, not just where you're from, your culture, not just where you were born, about your parents. How were they? How was life before you? These are stories that are kind of important. I mean, you can tell them to your kids and they can tell those stories to their kids. And it's cool because you kind of preserve the memories of your family. And even obviously in my parents' stories, they include my grandparents. So these stories are awesome because you get to see your grandparents in a light that you don't even know of. And you get to see your parents in a light that you don't even know of. And that one is honestly a good start. It's something for them to kind of open up in their memories and talk to somebody who hasn't heard of their legacy, their history, their story. And obviously from someone who cares about their story. I mean, you are their child and you care. So even that, it's cool to just hear and understand where they come from. I used to not understand why my parents were so strict with me. But because I now know about their history and how tough life was, and especially for my dad, it was eye-opening for me because now I understand why he was so strict and why he just is so super protective of us. So it'll give you a different depth and a different dimension to how you view your parents and how you want to have a good relationship with them. So there's a lot of things that come into play. And I think having a relationship with our parents is one of the best things to have in our 20s, and just to continue to always have someone in your side. And life will throw a lot of fake people at you, a lot of fake situations and hurtful events. And, your parents will always be there. And even though sometimes they might not agree and they might not be happy for a little while, they will always be open with you and willing to kind of take you back and connect with you in ways that may not be as easy with other people. So yeah, and the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, your parents, I mean, they do change, like I said, but not as dramatic and not as much as us in our 20s who are still trying to figure ourselves out. So again, that's why I say to take the initiative, to just open up to them and see where it goes from there. I definitely encourage it. I'd love to hear what happens. And, I'd also love to hear any history stories about your parents too. That would be awesome. I love hearing stories about people's come up and just how they started a family and found love and all that stuff. And honestly, when you're going through life and just debating on opening up to your parents, just know they've unconditionally loved you up to this point, and honestly, the worst is over and they will welcome you with open arms with anything that you need them for. And yes, you have to accept that your parents are how they were raised, but you too are also how they raised you. So eventually, and you may not realize it when you have kids of your own, there are going to be some parenting aspects about you that are basically a mix of your parents, and literally you won't even realize it until you just catch yourself in the moment and you're like, damn, I was like my dad with that reaction. And that's totally okay. Just take the responsibility for who you are today, totally acknowledge it, and accept the fact that you were basically a byproduct of your parents, literally and figuratively, and now are kind of becoming your own person, which is in all the best ways going to be a great experience for the both of you to see you grow into such a beautiful person. And, still have your parents there to support you throughout the whole process. And after all that, you'll totally realize that they are just normal human beings too, just like you. And honestly, it'll humble you in more ways than one, and you'll just be super appreciative of their existence and their love and their company. And it'll be one of the best relationships that you have ever built. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my talk with my parents. And it was really fun just because I love talking about my parents and just talking about how our relationship has totally evolved. So I hope you guys learned a thing or two about your own relationships with your parents and make it something that's positive and beneficial for you and your growth. And if you have any questions, concerns, or topics you want to talk about, I usually do some questionnaire sometimes, but if by random you think of something that you'd like me to talk about, please feel free to DM me at Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. My Instagram and my TikTok are at Philline Podcast, and my Twitter is at Philline. So thanks again for listening, you guys. Till next time, bye!